Hello and welcome. This is Working Class to World Class. But before we go any further, I do have a little favour of you. If you could hit that follow or subscribe button, then that would be a massive help. Thank you. In this episode, I'm catching up with a really lovely chap all the way from England. He now lives in the USA, working for one of the biggest companies in the world. He started off living with his Nigerian family, who were a bundle of energy and optimism, and they always knew that he would do really well in life. Well, they weren't wrong. He started off in the financial sector, and then he realised, you know what, they weren't his kind of people. So he weaved his way into media, he built his way up, and the rest is history. Breaking through the barriers of adversity. I'm Lynn Lester, and this is Working Class to World Class. So Yusuf, it's brilliant to be with you today. You look as if you're somewhere quite sunny.
It's deceptive. I'm sat in New York. It is actually raining today. The only good, and I'm looking this way because I have a window just to my left. I have a lot of light coming into my office, so whatever the weather is outside, it kind of actually looks quite bright in here, which is I take as a huge bonus.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny, in Glasgow or Clydebank when I am, it's dry, it's sunny, it's freezing, and I do have a cat at the window begging to get in, but I'm going to keep her out a bit longer because she'll just get involved in this. So can you, for everybody tuning in, can you just tell them like who you are and what you do? Sure.
So I am Yusuf Chuku, and I said that like it meant something. I am Yusuf Chuku. I'm an advertising strategist. Is probably the best way to describe it. I have spent my entire career, which is just over a quarter of a century. I've sort of stopped counting now. It's terrible when you count it in proportions of a century. But anyway,
you look so young.
And so I sit at NBCUniversal in the ad sales and partnerships division. I run a team of strategists, researchers, analysts, all of whom are really there to help our clients understand the marketplace a bit better, understand like the opportunity that exists for their brands, and hopefully kind of help them make their advertising as effective as possible.
Wow, that sounds really impressive. So I know that my family tuning in will be like, oh my God, this guy's like really important. So, I mean, it's obviously a dream because you're in New York at the moment as we speak. You've obviously got this global remit, you've got a team, you're working for one of the biggest brands in the world. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. But obviously you got there somehow, but you certainly didn't start there. So I'm going to take you off your pedestal for a wee second, and I'm going to week you back, or as we say in Scotland, week you back all the way to where it started. So where were you brought up? Or actually, I'll stop that. Where were you born?
I was born in North London, in what was, still is Highbury, but it looked very different when I was born there. So I was born to Nigerian immigrants to the UK. So my mum and dad had both come to the UK in the 60s. They had decided that the free education system was worthy of them staying and having children there. And so, born in Highbury. The thing about it though is when I was born there, it wasn't kind of as nice as it is today. So my parents had this uncanny ability to move out of what became rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. And so, born in Highbury, then we moved to Stoke Newington. Then we left Stoke Newington just before it got very expensive. And anyone who knows London real estate kind of realized that was another miss. And then I ended up spending most of my time growing up in Edmonton, in North London.
Wow. And I'm going to pretend I know where everywhere is. I have no idea. But I'm like,
to be honest with you, if you're in Edmonton, then you're either visiting someone or you're lost. And so there's not much. And no disrespect to anyone that's listening that maybe is currently living there, but it's Edmonton. I think and it's not saying that we didn't have some famous people come from Edmonton. The biggest is probably I think Chaz and Dave are from Edmonton, and Bruce Forsyth, I think he's from Edmonton. It's kind of
Where'd you head all the celebs?
I don't know if you ever watched Birds of a Feather, which is like the poorer sister lived in Edmonton.
There you go. You're surrounded with famous people. Well, where I'm from, wet, 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 come from here.
Oh,
And Kevin Bridges as well. So there you go. So full of famous people. So, you talk about where you're from, and obviously it sounds quite a humble place. So what was it like growing up? Like, yeah, give us a bit of insight.
it was. I think at the time I probably didn't. Most of my youth was focused on leaving, and not like going very far. I just wanted to live in central London. That was like, but some of my aspirations. But like, I loved it. In that, like, it even though it took a long time, you could still get all over London. And I think growing up in London, particularly in my formative years in like the 80s and 90s, it was like amazing. Like so much I think like energy, and I got to mix with lots of different kids. So I was a skater, and so I hung out with lots of other skateboarding, and I think that allowed me to kind of meet kids that were kind of different to me and lived in different areas, but like it taught you how to kind of, I guess, like navigate the world slightly differently. And probably the I talk about the biggest not challenge, but like the lessons growing up, because I was the son of immigrants. My home was it was Nigeria. Like, you closed the door and we ate Nigerian food. My parents and their friends discussed Nigerian politics. It, like, the way in which we were expected to behave as kids, all of it was dictated by being Nigerian. But because I was living in North London, when I left my home, like, everything was totally different. And so it's like, what that means is, like, like the 7-8-year-old me would be at a friend's house, and all the behaviors, how they relate to their parents, everything they do was actually really foreign, even though I was like in the UK and I was in someone's, English home. To me, it was very different. And so as a child, you then have to like decode that. You like have to figure out why things as they are. And I think like that you learn, like, sort of how you learn empathy. You learn how to kind of figure out people and understand, like, their motivations and behaviors, and all of which became kind of like, I think, probably just early training for the job that I do today. But like it was really, I think, just being a young child trying to figure out the world that was kind of very different to the one that I was used to at home.
So I guess that's quite unique, because obviously you've got the cultural difference where your parents were from, and obviously you close the door and you're in a different world, I guess, to some degree. You go out there and you're just hanging about with ordinary kids, and as you say, it's quite different. Now, it was interesting. So I did one of these, which I know you've watched, with Dave Trott, and he was talking about, for him, the minute you go out your door, particularly where he lived in London, you were street smart and you had to have your wits about you. So talk me through that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it was yes, like, without. And it's funny because I have kids now, and I'm obsessed about, like, my son walking around New York with his headphones on, no idea of where he is. I was like, you had to see trouble from like blocks away to survive growing up. And so you got robbed on I'd probably say fortnightly basis. It wasn't, yeah, but you kind of just accepted that it was like that. And whether it was casual violence outside of pubs or police harassment, you kind of just like, just how things were. And I got with it's funny, again, only looking back on it now, realizing that, like, not only did we fear sort of other kids on the street, we also feared the people that were meant to be enforcing the law. So kind of, you were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Actually, it was just, you just had to be wary of every interaction. And
absolutely.
So, yeah.
And as you say, you sort of live this life, and you take it for granted because it's what you only know what you know. But I suppose what you pointed out is you're slowly starting to build a lot of things that you're about to use in business, which we'll talk about in a wee second. So I don't want to go there quite yet, but we will go there in a minute, because I'm really keen to know. So
obviously from the Nigerian family, it sounds really, they sound great actually. But you know, how did you occupy yourself, like whether it be in the house or whether it be out in the street? Like what games did you play?
All right. So I guess I was kind of like alternative in a strange sort of way. So did lots of stuff that I guess we so basically I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. And so like big AD&D. I loved chess. I was a big skater, and at the time skating wasn't particularly cool. So I think I managed to choose a lot of pastimes that were like the uncoolest things to do at the time. That were But I don't know. I kind of really enjoyed them. I think it was I'm not sure what the Dungeons and Dragons thing was about, but like probably just the other guys that were playing. Like it was our thing. It was how we bonded. But yeah, they lots of nerdy pursuits.
Oh, I think they're quite cool today. I mean, there's that movie, isn't there, about chess now?
So
it's like the end thing, so you're actually really cool now.
All the things that like were just not it's funny like how things, I mean, even the idea of skating being particularly cool is, I still find it odd because it just wasn't. Our clothes weren't cool, the things we were into, and it suddenly it being kind of co-opted by mainstream culture. Like it's been decades now, but it still surprises me.
But it's really, it's so fun because like I can't actually skate. Like I wish I could, and actually makes me feel really uncool. I've never been able to skate, and I don't know why. I just can't. Like I'm just rubbish. I can't even ice skate. So I've never went skiing. So I would probably have to sit in the bar where everyone else went to do it. So like from your family, was it quite a big family? Did you have siblings?
I did have two sisters. So I have two sisters. My parents divorced, so my dad actually remarried. So I also have like another brother and sister. But yeah, it wasn't as Nigerian families go. It wasn't particularly large. But like my one, probably the biggest, or not the oddest thing, like the thing that kind of was probably the most impactful on growing up was that my dad went back to Nigeria when I must have been maybe 3 years old. So he went back with the intention of like setting up a business and for us to follow. So for example, I spent from like age 3 to 11 or 12 waiting to go back to Nigeria, with my dad literally coming home for like 2 weeks at Christmas every year and then going back. So I never really it put kind of a bit of a strain on that relationship, and it meant that we took in lodgers in our house, and so it was it meant for like it wasn't quite like a nuclear family. And then my parents obviously later divorced. That distance put a huge strain on their relationship. So can't remember. I have no idea. Like it's like most things in my youth I can kind of trace back and kind of go, well, that impacted this later on. I have no idea what happened there. Maybe it just made me a better dad and more present dad. But like other than that, it was it was quite.
Did your dad ever come back?
He did in the end. He did, but never came back to our house. Yes, yeah. So now he's back in the UK now. The business never. It's funny. I speak to other kids, other sort of like British Nigerian kids, and it was a very similar story of like expecting to go back, and going back was weird because we weren't born there, so we were kind of going back to our parents' homeland. But it like some did, many didn't, but it was like a very common theme.
It must be quite difficult.
Because you think about you spend a relation, like the place you are born and your home you think of as temporary for a big chunk of your youth. I was always like, this is not, obviously we're not staying, this is like a temporary thing. And so it's an odd way to live.
Well, you talk about having lodgers. I mean, I in one hand I think that'd be quite cool because you've just got lots of people that you could hang out with, that's company. But what is that really like?
Oh, it just means it just puts a huge strain on the bathroom. Like we lived in a 3-bedroom house. One of the bedrooms was essentially a box room, so it's like it wasn't particularly large. And we had so my elder sister was in the box room. We had another 2 guys from Malaysia in the bedroom. Then we had another tenant, another woman, another nurse in the other room. And then me and my younger sister and my mother lived downstairs, essentially in a curtained off section of the living room. And so it was, and yeah, we had 1 bathroom and obviously 1 kitchen. So it was tight. So I just, my memories are more just of like smelling other people's food being cooked and being curious what they were eating.
So what age were you when you were sort of sharing with your mum and your sibling?
4, 5, 6. Okay. Yeah, Yeah.
And I guess it's just normal, isn't it? It's not as if you thought it was weird. It was just what you did. And, you know, what was it? Was it just quite the norm?
Yeah, it just kind of just accepted it. Like didn't know any different. And so yeah, accepted it. It's not dissimilar to, like, I guess a lot of people's living situations here in Manhattan, but like it was different there. It wasn't like necessarily a conscious choice. It wasn't like a lifestyle. It was like sheer necessity. But I to this day, it's funny. I appreciate space. I'm obsessed by like big lofts and big space, just because it was a premium, like a massive premium growing up. So always, just to me, like luxury is just space.
Yeah. And I guess it goes back to the whole survival. You do what you have to do to survive. And you know, for a lot of people, particularly working class people, wealth is all about, it's not about the money, it's about the warmth, it's a roof over your head, it's the food in your belly.
Yeah.
And so I guess your mum sounds like a legend, because she had to do what she had to do to make sure you had what you needed. And, you know, from that point of view, it sounds really nice in terms of you're all together. You probably found it quite exciting in different ways, apart from the bathroom bit annoying. But like, what was it like for money for you when you were younger? Did you have enough to sort of do luxury things, or? No,
we did. My memories are always of just like, I never used to ask my mum for anything. Like, I just was always conscious that like I didn't want to put her in the position of having to say no. And so you just, I have no idea when I learned the lesson that like it was unlikely that we were going to be able to get certain things, but I guess I must have learned at a very young age, because you just grew up just kind of knowing that like there's lots of things that your friends had that you just weren't going to get. So even as a skater, my board was always like a hand-me-down from a friend. I would buy like their sneakers when they were kind of finished with them. You kind of go, right, there's a little bit more wear in it. So it was you just were conscious that like it was just tough. And so she worked every day, and so we weren't like there was always food on the table. So I kind of always appreciated that, and knew not even to take that for granted. But we definitely were sort of starved of, I guess, some of the luxuries that I know my kids live with.
Yeah, lucky kids.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, you know, there's like what's the Monty Python's sketch where they're kind of talking about like how tough it was for them growing up, and you know, the mountains and rivers they had to swim to get to school. But like I have a friend that we go through that, and there's lots of, again, stuff that you didn't think of at the time as tough because it was just life. But like you look back on it now, you're like, it was not easy.
Yeah. How did that make you feel? You know, if your friends had stuff that you couldn't have, how did you deal with that?
I think there is what's interesting about like the Nigerian mindset, and it's not, maybe it's just like Nigerian immigrant mindset, is that there was this eternal optimism that existed. You think about like just growing up and just like we were going to go to this better life that my dad was preparing in Nigeria. So you kind of have this like there's this place that you're getting to, so you kind of you accept the kind of the current situation and the expectation that like there is something bigger. There is no doubt that like, because my parents were originally there for the education system, they also had a big belief that it was the thing that was going to open up the world to you. So there was this it's a oh shit, what's the comedian's name? Mickey Flanagan. He has this there's this joke he tells about like ambitions at his school, and or the lack of ambition, and he talks about one of the kids in his class like wanted to be a van driver, and everyone in the class is like laughing, going, "You joker, like none of us gets to drive the van, we're the people that carry the stuff to the van." And so it was just this like the lack of like belief that like there is anything better for you, kind of like that existed on the street that I grew up with. But in our house, like the expectation was, you will go to university and you will become whatever you want to be. Well, I say whatever, you would become one of 5 things, you know, doctor, lawyer, accountant. Yeah. But like there was this belief that like that was like not even just a possibility, it was kind of like your destiny. And so having that destination and I guess like an optimism about what is possible, like I think helps you kind of get through stuff.
Yeah, it's always about manifestation, isn't it? They talk about that, what you think and what you believe. As long as you put the graft in, there's a really good chance. And so your mum's saying this to you, which again makes it sound really cool. What did she do? Because you said she worked and she put food on the table. So what? Yeah. So I'm just interested to hear, the lady doing a certain job is telling you this. Like, what was her role?
So she, when she arrived in the UK, she went to like secretarial school, which they kind of had then, to learn to like do shorthand and type and stuff. And then she ended up at Barclays Bank in the city, but as like essentially just like a bank clerk, but just like processing payments and stuff like that. So what was interesting, she was sat there, and this is like the 80s now, so she's watching these like young graduates come in, essentially become the yuppies of the time, earning good money on the trading floor. And so she was like, yeah, you can do that. Like, in fact, you should definitely do that. And so it's funny that literally became the thing. I think aged 14, it was decided that like my future was in finance. And I think by 16, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a trader. And then I think by 18, I was like, yeah, I'm going to trade fixed income derivatives. So I was really clear about, it's like a whole thing.
Wow.
I was really clear about like this life that was ready for me in the city.
But it sounds like an arranged marriage, but it's an arranged job. You just know
kind
what
of,
you're going to be.
Yeah, totally. So it was like, so I studied economics, went to university, studied economics. It was like, it was just, that was just like, that was the path.
That was just it. So, but before you got to uni, so obviously you've let your story out. You went to uni, you did economics. But before that, when you were at school, like, were you always naturally quite smart at school?
No. I was very polite. And actually that kind of went a long way in my school. But no, I went to a Catholic boys' school in North London, which was filled with rather aggressive priests. In fact, we had the thing called the ferula, which was like a strap with like essentially studs on it. It was what they used to cane boys. And when I started, corporal punishment was still very much legal in the UK. And the only thing that the school did is like your parents had to opt out, I should say. And so I took a form home on the first day of school, and I said to Mum, if you sign this, they can't hit me. And she was like, well, you're a good boy, so they won't hit you, so I'm not going to sign it. Which kind of weird logic. But like, essentially the school had a whole thing where if you were going to be punished, like if you committed if you were suspected of it and you're going to be punished, you would be told how many times you'd be hit, but you wouldn't be told when. And so it was like the part of the punishment was living knowing that you were about to receive this punishment, but you didn't know when. So you'd essentially come into school and be shit scared that that was the day. And anytime someone came into the class, you'd be worried that like you were going to get called. And so it was basically this awful suspense. So literally, Alfred Hitchcock went to our school many years before, and he talked about like, that's where he learned about suspense, knowing that something awful is going to happen, but like not knowing when. It's kind of terrible.
Oh
But like
God.
that was essentially, yeah, that was the school. So we had lots of boys from all over North London. The school was essentially 3 schools in one. So you relatively early in school, you sat a test, and that test determined which band you were in. And depending on what band you were in, you had completely different lessons. And so if you were lucky enough to be put into top band, then the chances were you were going to go off and go to university and have a profession. And the middle band, you essentially you were going to go off and you were essentially going to kind of do a sort of a manual job. And if you're in bottom band, they kind of just gave up all hope. It was like that bad. And so it was an odd school, because you wouldn't even know anyone in the other band, because you wouldn't even do classes. Like, we did sports in our band. So it was a strange kind of segregated place.
God, it sounds interesting. I mean, the whole suspense thing, do you know, it's the modern version of that today is if you've got volatile colleagues or a boss and you don't know what day it's going to happen.
Yeah.
God, that's pure madness. Like,
yeah.
So
It's like when I was explaining to my son about how like you'd get hit by a teacher, just like a slap, back of the head, and he'd be like, "What would you be slapped for?" And I was like, "Everything." I remember being slapped, and I turned around. I was like, "Sir, what was that?" And he's like, "Well, you're thinking about it, aren't you?" I'm like, "Thinking about it?" It was like a preemptive punishment.
Imagine thinking at school, like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Oh, I remember a kid's arm being broken after him being shoved against the wall by a teacher. I remember him coming in the cast like a few days later. Teacher, nothing happened. It
Oh
was.
my God.
I'm never quite sure even if they liked kids. Well, prerequisite for teachers was like just a hatred of young boys.
But you don't need to worry about getting beaten up in the playground. You wait till you get in the class and sorted. Game on.
I purposely didn't name the school just because I thought I don't want to. But it was it was like good and bad for many reasons. I think lucky enough to be sat in top band was definitely a good thing. But it was like, it wasn't the best school in the world.
No. Geez, what toughened you up anyway? I mean, I think the thing is as well, you probably were more fearful of your mother, like not like going along with her wishes, really building a career. And you probably didn't, I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I guess you didn't want to let her down. You were like, okay.
Well, because there is the implicit understanding that like everything that she has done, her whole life has been about giving you an opportunity. So the idea of squandering that and essentially kind of going, everything you've done since the day you arrived in the UK is kind of wasted, is just like, that weighs on you. Yeah. So you are kind of conscious of the expectation.
Yeah. And I guess that's where, immigrant parents, that's where they see the opportunity, because they've traveled the world to come here to give you, when they had their children, to give them a chance. So I guess, that to me makes a lot of sense, and why you stuck in. And also, given the fact that you maybe didn't hang out in the streets and you went skating, you played chess, probably gave you a bit more time to study and do all the things that you had to try hard at.
Yeah. And but the study, I really genuinely wasn't that smart at school. I was distinctly average-ish, but I was really polite. Like, my report card was genuinely like teachers saying how much of a pleasure it was having me in the class, even if I was like a middling performer. Like, I think just learning really early on that, if I'm just a nice kid, you can life's a lot easier.
Yeah, it's manners. When I used to get report cards, it used to say, it was either good or excellent. It was never poor, and then it was always but talks too much in class or needs to pay more attention. And having met me, I think you probably understand why that is. So you've went through this journey, right? Okay, you've graduated, and was it economics you graduated in?
Yes. Yeah.
So you've done that. So what then happens after that?
So I was at this point, I was still on the path of going into investment banking. I had done a whole load of internships, and it's funny because I disliked them all. Like every summer I'd work in a different bank doing a different thing and I hated it. But my assumption was that was just what being an adult was about. Like no one actually liked their job. So I didn't go in expecting to like it. And so when I didn't like it, I was like, of course not. But I plowed on, and there was a turning point at an interview. I think probably final round interview at what was Morgan Stanley. Dean Witter was called at the time. It's like the stockbroking arm with Morgan Stanley. But like they asked me a very simple question, which was what motivates you? And I gave a really long answer, like quite a detailed answer around like learning new things and overcoming, like just I talked a lot. And I remember I hadn't even finished answering, and I realized like these three guys were like looking at me like I was crazy. Like, well, like genuinely, their face was saying, well, what the hell are you talking about? And then finally one of them just goes, look, can I stop you there? And he said, what about money? And I was like, oh yeah, no, I like money. That motivates me. He goes, no, do you love money? And it was odd. It caught me off. It caught me by surprise, and I was kind of like, I was like, I had to think about it, which was obviously the wrong thing to do. And then finally, I was like, actually, no. Like, I like money, but I don't think I love money. And he was like, look, we all love money, and it's the love of money that allows us to do what is necessary to make money. So he's like, if you don't love money, you can't work here. You'll never survive. And I remember at the time I thought he was a dick, and I was like, but like it was probably the best advice I'd ever gotten, because it was like he was right. I was like, this is not the world for me. I like the idea of having money and the comfort that it brings and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't, and still don't. I don't love it. It's not the driving force. And so I had a career crisis age 21, because suddenly all these plans disappeared, and suddenly I had to make decisions about like a career which I hadn't really actually made a decision before. It had all just lined up. So it was an odd crisis to have at a young age.
I was going to say, you were only 21, so you were pretty prime. And so you decide, I mean, obviously these people, it sounds to me as if you just, they're just not your kind of people. So Frank Carter from the Rattlesnakes, when I chatted to him, he was saying it was all about hanging about with his kind of people, the people that got him, understood him.
Oh, totally. I remember I turned up to Climbwalk Benson, which is now defunct, but I turned up to one of their recruitment weekends, and I had a suit on, which I was very proud of. I just bought it. It was like brown. And again, this is like the early 90s. It had 4 buttons, which I thought was super cool. And I turned up and I walked into the room, and like there must have been, I don't know, 60, 70 other candidates. And what threw me was I kind of expected that like I might be one of the few black faces there. What I hadn't anticipated was that I'd be the only person not in a navy blue suit. In a sea of navy blue suits, I stood out for the brown suit that I was wearing. But it was like a visceral kind of a very visual representation of the fact that like I should have read the signs then. I didn't fit in. But I kind of, another sign I disregarded. Plowed on. But it was very obvious that I didn't fit in, and not only did I not like the people that were interviewing us, I didn't particularly care for the other candidates. Again, another bad.
Yeah, another indicator. But what was really good is at 21, you had, I guess, the assertiveness to say, do you know what, not for me, because there's a lot of people that would have went along with that and just tried to be something they're not. So the fact that you didn't do that also makes you cool, just like your mum. So that's great. So what did you decide to do then? So you're not doing this kind of stuff. What career did you take? And also, how did you break it to your mother? Yeah.
So that was, there was, at the same time, there was another thing happening, which definitely helped. So I had met my now wife at university. And so I think by this point, I was sort of like, we were quite serious. But I remember the fact that she was at the medical school and was going to be a doctor, one of the ambitions they had for their children that never manifested, but the idea that I was potentially going to marry a doctor, so therefore there was going to be a Dr. Chuku in the family somehow, definitely like gave me a little bit of latitude to kind of rethink my own career. And so I definitely leaned into that quite heavily. But it was tough because I hadn't really thought about what I wanted to do. So suddenly there was this like, oh, I should really like start to explore like what other jobs there might be. And then there was this guy that we knew that was a buyer for a sort of a trendy store in London, but he traveled the world buying sneakers. And the young me, and he lived in this kind of warehouse space in Hoxton, and he had like these two Japanese girls living with him. It was just, I never quite understood the living situation, but the 21-year-old me was like, I don't get it, but it seems pretty cool. And so he was a buyer, and I saw an ad for a TV buyer, and I assumed it was like to buy television shows for a TV station. So I was like, well, I watch TV, and his life as a fashion buyer is pretty cool, so let me try this life as a TV buyer. So I responded to the ad. It was at the interview that I learned that like it wasn't buying TV shows. It was like to buy TV airtime for an ad agency. And they told me I wouldn't be very good at it, but like I should probably look at like this thing called planning. And so I was like, all right, let me go off and look into this thing they told me to look into. And what I was immediately drawn to was that like the idea of a planner at an ad agency is that it was a balance of like being a muse and driving creativity. So kind of like understanding the creative opportunity and helping translate that to creatives. But it was also about being a like business consultant and helping brands know the opportunity for their business. So it was, for me, it was like, great, I get to use the economics side of me and this side of me that kind of leaned into the business world. At the same time, I got to work with and hang out with creative people who were the people that I knew anyway. All my ex-skate friends were now graphic designers and photographers and stuff. So I was like, oh, great, this agency world, I get to hang out with creatives that I hang out with anyway, and I get to utilize like my business knowledge. And the thing that pushed it over the line was I didn't have to wear a suit to work. I got to wear trainers or sneakers. So I was like, sold, let's do this.
That's so cool.
Yeah. This was like why I decided on advertising.
And what's even cooler is it wasn't hand-me-down sneakers, I bet, but it was sneakers you bought. So that was a win. And so here's the thing, right? You know, so obviously the kind of bank and finance, they were a bit snobby, a bit up in sales, didn't really fit in, weren't your kind of people. So you're suddenly in advertising, you've kind of got mates that you know, people in that kind of genre. Were there people you came across that didn't make you feel you belonged there because of where you came from? Yeah,
it was interesting. The first agency I was at, I effectively, and I remember I was referred to as like a diversity hire, which was, so what was fascinating about it though, is that it wasn't because of the color of my skin. It was the fact that I was one of the few graduates that wasn't from Oxford or Cambridge. So you go into this environment that is like, very homogenous, not only racially, but in terms of class and people's origins. It was, you know, the ad agency world was, like just kids of a certain type. So you were always conscious that you didn't belong. The things that you experienced at the time, and again, like the term microaggressions, hadn't even been invented at this point, but it didn't mean that those didn't exist. And so you'd feel it every day, like these odd comments around like, so people would say like, you don't look like a strategist, which is essentially just, okay. And so you'd always feel this, that even agencies made decisions about who would work on certain business based on the client. And so you were constant, like they wouldn't put you on certain accounts because of how you looked. And so it was, wasn't easy. And then, I mean, big things all like, if you don't look like anyone that leads the company or any of its leaders, you therefore can never be considered as a potential leader of a company. And so you do have all these things kind of working against you. And it's not because it's a creative industry, but that doesn't stop like the conservatism with a small c kind of driving a lot of things.
Geez, I mean, the thing is the world, isn't it? It's the real world that we live in. And actually, it's still, to an extent, still like that to this very day. Maybe not as bad, but it's still the same. And so for you, picture the scene. I'm trying to imagine what it'd be like. So obviously, in the industry that we're in the similar industry, we go to lots of fancy do's and big ballrooms, and it's flashy. Like, a lot of my friends and family could never understand what that's like. So can you ever remember the first time you ever went to something super fancy? And I want to know, when you walked in, what did you think and feel?
Yeah, it's funny. So, going back, like I was not unfamiliar with being out of place. So you like, there was a comfort in it that like, I was like, well, I'm always out of place. So this is just another instance of being out of place. But I think there is it's interesting. You always, there's lots of things you that are beyond your control that mean you stand out. So I always talk about like my race enters the room before I do, just because of my name. So you visibly stand out, and so you then end up overcompensating to make sure that you don't stand out in other ways. So I remember even at a young age, my mum was like big on us not sounding like we were from our part of North London. So I should sound a lot more Cockney, but like it was drummed out of me. She was like, well, at least if you sound different, like it will force people to reappraise you. So I just remember going into like, big black tie functions, or to be honest, even just fancy restaurants. Like the first time I ate an expensive restaurant was at work. I'd never been in one. And then suddenly you're in a work lunch, eating food that you'd never heard of, with utensils that you didn't really know how to use. And so I went to great lengths to pretend that I knew what was going on. And so I'd order food off the menu that I'd never eaten, and then just like eat it, despite hating it, but desperately not wanting people to kind of realize that I didn't belong. And so you would just plow ahead. But it was. And it's funny because I think back to it now, and the class obsession that exists in the UK meant that it was immediately obvious to anyone that I had no idea. But like in my mind, I was like, they won't notice. And so I just pretending or trying to pretend that like I knew what was going on.
To this very day, and I don't know if you feel like this, to this very day, I sometimes get pangs of guilt. So when I do, for most of what I do is events and big award shows, and whilst it's not maybe the same as it was the big fancy ballrooms, 800 people, the poshest dinners you can imagine. And actually, although I've done this for nearly 20 years, and sometimes I don't even know what some of the words mean either to this day, because I actually never went away and researched it. I just used to get them, see the name of it and go, oh yeah, that looks nice. I looked at it on how it looked and how it tasted, other than the name. It's like, oh, it sounds posh. Can't really say it, but that'll do. As long as you spell it right. I have no idea. So, you kind of go into this sort of, this in this environment, we would do tastings. When you're a customer to a hotel or a venue, they fall over you and they treat you like royalty, and it's just like, oh my God. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is I feel quite guilty. Now, I'm not saying I don't enjoy it, I love it, but when I'm having that dinner, I do think about my mom and dad all the years ago when they were alive, and they wouldn't know what that's like.
No, it's very it's always top of mind that like what you're experiencing is a privilege. Never, I've never not felt that. Although at the same time, I learned pretty early on that like, despite people's being fancy, they actually don't know a lot. Like a friend of mine, he had a job, an off license in Parsons Green, like Fulham sort of area, and a very nice part of London. And I remember being like hanging out with him in the evening when he was serving customers, and people would come in and ask for like recommendations for like wines, and they would like tell you what they're going to eat and then expect you to kind of like suggest the wine. He knew nothing about wine, and I knew even less because I wasn't even working. I was just hanging out with him. It didn't stop us making recommendations all the time, like just making shit up. But what was worse is the people would make it, they should know, but they didn't know, and they would just take it and go, right, thanks. And then I remember people coming in like the following week going, thanks for that, it was amazing, I'll take another bottle. And it was an early lesson in like, I don't really know either. Like,
yeah, it's a hustle.
So, I just I definitely became less intimidated by people.
Yeah. It's so, obviously, I mean, you're obviously at NBC now, which is, I mean, it's a cool company. I mean, do you ever sit there and go, I work here, but all the decades ago, that was me in that house, sharing it with my mom and my sibling. Yeah, talk me through it.
Yeah, no, definitely, all the time. And it's more, but there are elements of it comes with big dollops of guilt. Like more because I'm very conscious of the huge amount of luck that played a part, like an outsized part in me being where I am. And so the guilt comes from just knowing that like the vast majority of people have been unlucky in their endeavors, and so the only thing that separates us is the luck. And so I sometimes feel a little guilty.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I've had this conversation with quite a few people. There is a bit, I think I always believe in a bit of luck and a bit of fate, but obviously I think you create your own as well. And you were an economic graduate, so you had a bit of clout in other ways, so yeah, I think you got a lot of the path on your own and your own merit, not just the luck.
Yeah, and you're opening up my pet subject, because it's there is, without a doubt, I never want to like to take away from the decisions people made and the hard work they put in. It's just that like that just wasn't there. Like 95% of the people I interact with every day, from the Uber driver to my boss, they all work hard. And so the only thing I can cling to, or the only thing I can identify that separates them, is just the luck that they have had along the way. Because it's like, other than that, like, yeah, there's no other reason. Like if you literally took, like if you paid people according to how hard they worked, things would be in complete reverse. Like the woman that used to clean our apartment, I know she had like 3 jobs alongside taking care of her kids. Like, she worked hard. And unfortunately, the reality of like, no matter how hard she worked, her situation was not going to change.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to see that. I mean, I guess, one of the things that you had going for you, which maybe took you beyond the luck, was obviously the qualification. But do you think, for people coming through, do you think you need to go to uni?
Yeah, good question. And I've been having this conversation with some nieces and nephews. I obviously, for me, it was a huge factor. In theory, no, you do not. I think in practice, I think particularly for a lot of working class kids, you kind of end up having to. Like, the opportunities are not equally distributed, and so I think without a degree, well, for example, now I never realised the advantages that other kids had until I became a middle class parent. So I look at like how we've raised our kids, and my wife essentially had the kids in medical school from the moment they could talk, because if they'd ask a question, she would give a very detailed answer. And so they learn stuff like all the time. It's like the equivalent of like living with your university professor. like all the time. And so like
Wow.
the amount of stuff that you just realize that you're essentially training these kids. They then have access to our network of other professional friends, which means that like internships and job opportunities exist. As a working class kid, that network doesn't exist. I couldn't speak to my mum or dad about, hey, can you speak to your friend that runs that ad agency and get like that? Doesn't exist. And then nor would they look at you and see potential because you do not look or come from the same place. And so the one thing that a working class kid can bring is at least the qualifications that says you should take me seriously. And so I think for a lot of kids from a certain background, without those qualifications, you are entering life with like one arm tied behind your back.
Do you know, I think that's really honest of you to say that. I mean, I think another time, well, let's have a chat, because I think I'd maybe disagree in some of that, but I think it's valid points. But, you know, when I, again, chatted to Dave Trott, who was, again, amazing, he's such a good guy. He was talking about when he ran his agency, he deliberately took the rejects and rebels, as he called them, the people that nobody else wanted, because he knew they had something about them. And that's the thing, I think a lot of, and I'm not saying that middle class people don't either. So, you know, I'm focusing on the topic. But, you know, the fact that working class people, I think they've just got a bit between their teeth. They've got a bit of something that's a bit of a je ne sais pas, you know, it's just something pretty special. So for you, if you look at being a working class boy, you know, a part of London, quite poor area, what is it about you that you've taken from your working class roots that you think gives you that edge today?
I never really consciously think about it. So now I'm actually thinking about it. So I think there is a just as much as you look on a lot of what you have as like a privilege, and you're aware of like how lucky you've been. At the same time, there's a lot of things I don't fear because of it. Like I'm very conscious that I can live with a lot less, and so I don't live in fear of losing it. I don't live in fear of like bosses. I had a conversation with someone recently about imposter syndrome, and I was like, even that, like, it's been a long time since I've even had tinges of that. But I think part of it is, and is it the working class? I don't know, but like you sort of see the world a little bit more for what it is, and so I don't look at people and think that they are a million times smarter than me, or that they have something necessarily particularly special. And so when you sort of see everyone as sort of the same, like you just feel a little bit less intimidated.
Yeah.
Right. And so for all the like, you'll meet someone who knows a lot about something you don't know. At the same time, you're conscious that therefore you know a lot that they don't. Like it's just just like, and no matter who they are. And so it just it means it, I guess I don't know if it's like a risk-taking thing as much as just like there is a confidence that comes with that. Quiet confidence, I think, not an arrogance, but a quiet confidence that comes with that.
I think that's a really good point, because it's all about, you have to accept you for being you, and also remembering that not everybody knows everything, although they might talk a good game. People can use big fancy words as much as they like. It doesn't make them, you know, more equipped. And also, as you said, it could be a bit of luck in there as well.
Totally. And it's actually just going back to the university thing. Like I had a very good friend that like he has like risen extremely high, again, humble background, risen in his career, but actually never went to university, but recently did an MBA. And I remember asking him about why he did it. And he was like, because it's no matter how much I achieved, there was always a question mark over like my academic ability. just because I didn't have this piece of paper. And so he was like, it then became about proving it to myself that like these people didn't have anything over me. And so he was like, so I went off and got the piece of paper that they all have. And as a like, it's not, it was a weird sort of like, to prove that it was unnecessary, he sort of
validation.
felt like he had to do it to kind of go.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I mean, to be fair, I'll tell you a secret. I actually, it's not a secret now, everybody knows, but I was going to get thrown out of uni. So I got into uni I was doing business, and I went for 1 year, and I just spent so much time in the union, and they basically said to me, we think we might have to throw you out. And I said, well, can I just leave? And they were like, yeah. So I left. So technically speaking, I did not get thrown out. I just decided it was not for me. Education was not for me.
But I always think there is a big difference between consciously rejecting something versus like never knowing if you could have done it. So I always, I always think it's funny because people talk about like the need for, I'm like, even when you look at a lot of the people that succeeded without a college degree, actually a lot of them were college dropouts, university dropouts versus like, and so there was a distinction between knowing that you could do something and deciding not to.
Yeah. Versus
trying to kind of not go that route. It's a different. I think it has a different implications.
Yeah. What makes us all different. And so to sort of wrap up, I do have a question. Are you still lucky to have your mum and dad with you?
So yes, but not. It's my mum suffers from dementia, and quite advanced. So one of the what was probably the hardest part of it is that like watching her go through life, working really hard, all of it in this kind of idea that like she was going to delay her gratification. And so literally not that long into her retirement, like the dementia set in. So she now has like near full-time care. All the money she had saved in her life has really now gone towards paying for her care. And so for me, the idea that like you should put off enjoying life is like I just can't do that. Like I'm not knowing where things are, what will happen and where things are going. I'm like, if you can seize the opportunity to like live and like enjoy the moment, then you should sort of seize it. And so it definitely caused me to rebalance how I think about like even just like saving. I'm like, it's so important to save for the future. At the same time, it's really important to spend and enjoy what you have when you can, because you just
don't know when.
Exactly.
Well, I think you've finished off with very wise words, and sending much love to your mom, and I hope she's comfortable, and I'm sure you get to see her every now and then. So, but thank you so much. I'm sure no matter what, your parents, your family are super proud of everything that you've achieved, because I guess although they gave you the dream and the vision, you're the person that made it happen. So congratulations on what you do. You are an amazing person, and thanks for sharing all of it today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.